10 stars go silent. The warning that nobody believed. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council, her hands trembling despite years of diplomatic training. The vast chamber stretched above her like a cathedral built for giants, its walls shimmering with the bioluminescent patterns of 1,000 alien languages. Representatives from 47 species watched her with eyes that ranged from curious to dismissive. "You must evacuate the core systems," Sarah said, her voice steady even as sweat beaded on her forehead. "The void is coming." High Chancellor Morpheus, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into rainbow patterns, made a sound like wind chimes laughing. "Ambassador Chen, humans have been members of the Galactic Council for only 30 years. You must understand that we have monitored the cosmos for millennia. There is no threat." Sarah pulled up a holographic display, her fingers dancing across the control pad. 3 months ago, the Denari system went silent. 2 months ago, the Kelvin cluster stopped responding. Last week, we lost contact with the entire Outer Rim. That's 40 billion souls, Chancellor. Gone without a trace. The council chamber erupted in a symphony of alien voices, clicks, whistles, harmonics, and growls blending into chaos. Sarah waited, knowing that panic and denial often wore the same face. The weight of ignored warnings. A towering reptilian delegate from Saros Prime rose to his full 3-meter height. "Silence falls across the galaxy for many reasons, human. Perhaps they simply chose not to respond. Perhaps they found better company than this council." Laughter rippled through portions of the assembly. Sarah felt her jaw tighten but forced herself to remain calm. She had learned that emotion, to many species, was seen as weakness rather than passion. "With respect, Delegate Krax, I've reviewed the data from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. We detected something before each silence, a wave of darkness that doesn't just block light. It consumes it. Stars disappear. Planets vanish. And whatever this phenomenon is, it's accelerating toward the core systems at an exponential rate." Chancellor Morpheus's crystalline form dimmed slightly, the only sign Sarah had learned to recognize as concern. "And what does humanity propose we do about this alleged threat?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been dreading. "Earth has developed a theoretical solution. We call it the resonance shield. It would require every ship, every station, every world in the Council to synchronize their energy outputs to create a harmonic barrier across multiple dimensions." "Theoretical?" A melodious voice came from the Songweaver delegation, beings who communicated through complex musical patterns. "You ask us to trust an unproven human theory over millennia of galactic stability? The choice between pride and survival." Sarah's fingers clenched into fists at her sides. She had known this would be difficult, but the stubborn pride of ancient civilizations was proving harder to penetrate than she'd imagined. "I'm asking you to trust the data. I'm asking you to choose survival over pride." The council dissolved into heated debate. Some species demanded to see more evidence. Others accused humanity of fearmongering to gain influence. A few quietly left the chamber, unwilling to even entertain the discussion. As Sarah watched the political theater unfold, her communication device buzzed. She glanced down at the message from Earth and felt her blood turn to ice. The void just consumed the meridian belt. ETA to Council space, 72 hours. She interrupted the arguing delegates, her voice rising above the cacophony. "We're out of time. The void has jumped forward. It will reach this system in 3 days." The chamber fell silent. Chancellor Morpheus approached the podium, his crystalline body emanating a soft, pulsing glow. "Ambassador Chen, if what you say is true, 3 days is insufficient time to implement your resonance shield across the entire council space." "No," Sarah admitted, her voice heavy with the weight of what she was about to propose. "But it's enough time to save those willing to trust us. Earth is offering sanctuary. Our system lies in a region of space that mathematical models suggest might resist the void's advance. We're prepared to take in as many refugees as our worlds can hold. When tomorrow becomes today." The offer sparked another explosion of debate. Some species saw it as a generous gesture of solidarity. Others viewed it as a human power grab, an attempt to position Earth as the savior of the galaxy. Sarah didn't care about politics anymore. She thought of her daughter back on Earth, of the millions who would die if she failed, of the billions across the galaxy who would disappear into nothing if the Council continued to debate while the universe collapsed around them. A small delegation approached her as the main session descended into chaos, representatives from the younger species, civilizations that had joined the Council in the last few centuries. They had less pride invested in galactic supremacy and more interest in continued existence. "Ambassador," said a Quillan delegate, her feathered crest rising in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of respect. "Our people are prepared to accept your offer. When can evacuation begin?" Over the next hour, as the older council members continued their debates, Sarah quietly coordinated with 24 species willing to trust human judgment over ancient pride. Ships were dispatched. Coordinates were shared. Families were awakened in the middle of their sleep cycles with news that they had hours to decide whether to abandon their homes. The price of being right. On the third day, as the first refugee ships approached Earth's solar system, the void reached Council space. Sarah watched from the observation deck of Earth's orbital command station as the darkness swept across the distant stars like a wave of oblivion. One by one, the lights of ancient civilizations winked out. The great council world of Primus, seat of galactic power for 10,000 years, was consumed in seconds. Beside her stood Chancellor Morpheus, one of the few high-ranking council members who had chosen to evacuate at the last moment. His crystalline form had lost much of its luster, dimmed by grief and shock. "You were right," he said softly, his voice like glass chimes in a funeral march. "And we were fools." Sarah felt no satisfaction in his admission. She watched the darkness advance, stopping just short of Earth's solar system as if hitting an invisible wall. The resonance shield, hastily implemented around Sol, was holding. "We saved who we could," Sarah replied, her voice hollow. "That's all anyone can do." Below them, on Earth and Mars and the orbital habitats, 60 billion refugees from across the galaxy were beginning the difficult process of starting over. Some were grateful. Others were resentful. Many were simply lost, survivors of civilizations that no longer existed. Sarah Chen, the human ambassador who had been dismissed and mocked, now stood as the guardian of what remained of galactic civilization. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. "What do we do now?" Morpheus asked. Sarah looked out at the wall of darkness surrounding their small pocket of light and thought of her daughter, safe in their apartment in New Geneva. She thought of all the children across dozens of species who would grow up in a universe much smaller than the one their parents had known. "Now?" Sarah said quietly. "Now we figure out how to push back the dark. The light beyond the void. Building hope from ashes." 6 months after the void consumed most of the known galaxy, Sarah Chen stood in what had once been a weapons testing facility in Nevada. Now it housed something far more ambitious, the Beacon Project. Dr. James Walsh, humanity's leading physicist, gestured enthusiastically at the massive array of crystalline structures arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. "The math is beautiful, Ambassador. If we're right, this won't just hold back the void. It might actually reverse it." Sarah studied the alien scientists working alongside their human counterparts. Quillan engineers calibrated energy matrices while Saurian mathematicians filled holographic displays with complex equations. Even Chancellor Morpheus had joined the project, his crystalline body uniquely suited to conducting the exotic energies they were attempting to harness. "How long until we can test it?" Sarah asked. 2 weeks, Walsh replied. "Maybe 3. We're working with technologies that combine principles from 40 different species. It's like trying to compose a symphony when everyone speaks a different musical language." The voice from the dark. That night, as Sarah reviewed progress reports in her temporary quarters, her communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission. The source coordinates made her freeze. They originated from deep within the void, from a region that should have been lifeless and dark. She accepted the transmission with trembling fingers. The face that appeared was humanoid but wrong in subtle ways, proportions slightly off, eyes too large, skin with an underlying shimmer that suggested something other than flesh. When it spoke, its voice bypassed her ears entirely, resonating directly in her mind. Ambassador Chen. We have been waiting for you to understand. Sarah's hand hovered over the emergency alert button. Who are you? What are you? We are what comes after. The void is not destruction, Ambassador. It is transformation. Your species calls it death because you fear change. But we offer evolution beyond your limited comprehension. You've killed trillions, Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. The being's expression shifted into something that might have been sadness. We have offered transcendence to trillions. Most accepted. Some, like your species, cling to flesh and fear. This is why we paused at your barrier, to give you time to choose. When the enemy offers paradise. Sarah's mind raced. Everything they had assumed about the void was based on absence, the silence of consumed worlds, the darkness that swallowed light. But what if they had misunderstood? Let me speak to someone who accepted your offer, Sarah demanded. Show me proof of this transcendence. The being nodded, and the transmission shifted. Suddenly Sarah was looking at a Denari diplomat she had known, a friendly colleague named Zethros. But Zethros was changed, his form flickering between solid and ethereal, his eyes containing depths that seemed to extend into infinity. Sarah, Zethros said, and his voice carried the same mind-to-mind quality. I am more than I was. I exist across dimensions you cannot perceive. I have shed the limitations of matter and discovered existence without end. The void offers this to all. No more pain. No more death. Only eternal becoming. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. And those who refuse? Zethros' expression remained serene, but something cold entered his infinite eyes. Cannot be permitted to interfere with galactic evolution. Those who cling to limitation will be incorporated, whether they choose or not. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone in the darkness of her quarters, her heart pounding. The hardest choice. Sarah called an emergency council meeting, gathering the leaders of all the refugee species. In the war room deep beneath Geneva, she presented everything she had learned. They're offering immortality, said Aquilin Elder, her feathers rippling with agitation. Existence without the burden of physical form. How is this not a gift? Because it requires giving up everything that makes us who we are, Sarah countered. Our individuality, our cultures, our ability to choose our own path. They don't see us as partners. They see us as unfinished projects to be completed. Chancellor Morpheus's crystalline form pulsed with soft light. Ambassador Chen, you must understand our perspective. Many of our civilizations are ancient beyond your comprehension. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have watched entropy claim everything we built. If there is truly a path to transcendence. At the cost of everything we are? Sarah interrupted. Chancellor, I've read your species' history. 10,000 years ago, your people were primitive silicon-based organisms living in volcanic vents. You chose to evolve, to grow, to reach for the stars. That was your choice. This isn't evolution, it's assimilation. When humanity refuses heaven. The debate raged for hours. Some species were tempted by the promise of transcendence. Others, like humanity, viewed it as a form of extinction dressed in attractive language. The coalition that Sarah had fought so hard to build was fracturing. Finally, Sarah stood and silenced the room with a gesture. I propose we let each species decide for themselves. Those who wish to accept the void's offer can lead the resonance shield. Those who want to remain as they are can stay and fight. Fight? Chancellor Morpheus asked. Ambassador, they offer us immortality. What do we have to fight for? Sarah thought of her daughter, now working in the refugee camps, helping alien children adapt to their new home. She thought of the human tendency to struggle against impossible odds, to choose difficult freedom over easy subjugation. We fight for the right to remain imperfect, Sarah said softly. For the right to die someday, knowing we lived as ourselves. For the chance to make our own mistakes and celebrate our own victories. They offer us eternity as a single note in someone else's symphony. I prefer our chaotic, beautiful, temporary song. The light that pushes back the dark. Over the next 2 weeks, 12 species chose to leave the protection of Earth's resonance shield. Sarah watched their ships sail into the void, their crews ready to embrace transcendence. She felt sorrow for their choice but respected their right to make it. The remaining 23 species committed to the beacon project with renewed determination. When they finally activated the beacon, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive array of crystalline structures hummed with power drawn from dozens of different energy sources, human fusion reactors, Quillen zero-point generators, Saurian quantum taps, and more. The technologies that should have been incompatible somehow harmonized, creating something greater than the sum of their parts. A wave of light exploded outward from Earth, pushing back the void inch by inch. Where the light touched, space returned to normal, stars rekindled, deadworld stabilized. It wasn't enough to reclaim everything they had lost, but it carved out a sphere of reality in the darkness, a pocket of existence where physical beings could continue their imperfect, beautiful lives. Sarah stood in the control room, surrounded by scientists from across the galaxy, and watched as they reclaimed their right to exist on their own terms. We did it, Dr. Walsh breathed, staring at the readings in disbelief. We're actually pushing it back. The new dawn. In the weeks that followed, the coalition began the slow work of rebuilding. The reclaimed space wasn't large, perhaps 1,000 star systems, a fraction of what had been lost. But it was theirs, protected by a network of beacons that combined the best technology and knowledge from 24 civilizations. Sarah stood on the observation deck once more, watching as the first expedition ships prepared to explore the reclaimed territory. Beside her, Chancellor Morpheus had regained much of his crystalline luster. Ambassador Chen, he said formally, the Council has voted. We wish to offer you the position of High Chancellor of the new coalition. Sarah shook her head. I'm just a diplomat, Chancellor. You need someone with more experience. Experience? Morpheus's laugh was like crystal bells. Ambassador, you convinced the most stubborn civilizations in the galaxy to abandon their pride and trust a species barely 3 decades old. You held together a coalition that should have shattered under the weight of fear and grief. You stood before an enemy offering eternal life and chose mortal imperfection. There is no one more qualified. Sarah looked out at the ships, at the diverse crews working together, at the fragile bubble of reality they had carved from the darkness. She thought of all they had lost and all they had saved. She thought of her daughter and the children of 100 species who would grow up in this smaller but fiercely defended corner of the universe. All except on one condition, Sarah said. We never stop pushing back. We never accept that this is all we can have. We keep building beacons, keep reclaiming space, keep fighting for our right to exist as we choose. Morpheus's crystalline form blazed with light. Ambassador, no, High Chancellor Chen, that is exactly what we intend to do. As Sarah watched the ships launch into the reclaimed stars, she allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had come to the galaxy as the youngest species, dismissed and underestimated. Now they stood as the architects of resistance, the species that chose imperfect freedom over perfect submission. The void still surrounded them, vast and patient. But within their sphere of light, life continued, messy, chaotic, mortal, and absolutely worth fighting for. Sarah Chen, the last ambassador of the old galaxy and first chancellor of the new, turned from the window and walked back to work. There were refugees to resettle, beacons to build, and a universe to reclaim. One star at a time.